All right, colleagues. So whenever we say overhead absorption, it means you're just trying to include overheads, all right, into the units that you are producing. Okay. You're just including the overheads that you incur in the factory into the units that you are producing. So the way we can include these overheads into the units we are producing, the various ways we can do that. All right. You can absorb them using the units produced. All right. That in doing that, you just get your total overhead cost and just divide it by the number of units produced. Okay. And that way you have included the overheads using the units produced. All right. You can include the overheads through machine hours. Okay. Just get your total overheads, total overhead cost divided by the total number of machine hours. All right. There you've included those overheads through machine hours into the units that you're producing. Okay. Another way you can do it is you can also use labor hours. All right. Just get the total overhead cost divided by the labor hours. And then there you have included the overhead costs into the units that you're producing through labor hours. Okay. So that's what overhead absorption means. Just including the overheads in the cost in the units that you are producing. Right. Now we've got what we call over absorption and absorption. Okay. So when you've overabsorbed, what happens is your actual overheads, okay, these especially the fixed overheads, because here we're focusing on the fixed overheads. Okay. Your actual fixed overheads are going to be less than the budgeted overheads. Okay, because the budgeted overheads, these are the absorbed overheads. Okay. So when you've over-absorbed, it means you have included too much of the fixed costs into the units that you are producing than you actually spent. Okay. Because here, as you can read here, over-absorption means we've charged more overhead cost to products than we actually spent. Okay. You have charged more of the overhead cost to the products than you've actually spent. So what will happen is your budgeted overheads or your absorbed overheads are going to be greater than your actual overheads. Okay, that is over absorption. Okay, now in the absorption costing statement, you have to make an adjustment for any over absorption that can take place. Okay, so there are two ways you can make this adjustment. Okay, the overabsorption, you can subtract it from the cost of sales. Okay, from the cost of sales for the goods that you're producing. Okay, and that you sold. Why you're subtracting from the cost of sales? Since you've overabsorbed, so you've overcharged. So it means your cost of sales is inflated. Okay, you've got an inflated cost of sales. So you have to reduce that inflated cost of sales by subtracting the overabsorbed overheads. Okay, colleagues, I'll show you a numerical example with what I'm saying here. So for now, just let's go along with what I'm saying, but I'm going to illustrate a numerical example. Okay, so when you've overabsorbed, you have to subtract from the cost of sales. Why? Because your cost of sales is going to be inflated. So you need to subtract those overabsorbed overheads to get an accurate cost of sales. Okay. Now, if you don't subtract from cost of sales, the other adjustment is with gross profit. Okay. Now, with gross profit, the over-absorbed overheads, you need to add them to the gross profit. Why? Because Since you've overcharged by overabsorbing, it means your cost of sales is inflated and it means your profit is less. Okay. Due to the inflated cost of sales, it means your profit is going to be less. Okay. So since your profit is less due to the inflated cost of sales, it means that over absorption you need to add it to the profit. Okay, since the profit was less than what was expected. Okay, so now let's see that numerically so that we get a clear picture. Okay, so here's an illustration. Okay, you've got revenue of 15,000. Okay, you have your cost of sales 7,800. So we say since you overabsorbed, it means you charge more overheads to the units that you are producing. So it means your cost of sales is going to be inflated. So since it's inflated, and let's say that your absorption was by 1,000. In this example, we overabsorbed our overheads by 1,000. Okay. So since our cost of sales is inflated, it's higher than expected because we overabsorbed by 1,000. We need to subtract the overabsorbed overheads. Okay, so 7,800 minus 1,000, you get 6,800. Okay, this is your adjusted cost of sales. All right, then you can get your profit. Remember, revenue profit is just your sales revenue minus your cost of goods sold. So 15,000 minus 6,800, you get 8,200. Any questions before I show the other adjustment with gross profit? Because we said there will be two, there are two. You can either do the adjustment with cost of sales, or you can do the adjustment with gross profit. So yes. Any questions before I move to the next part? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay, then then that profit that you're going to get is going to be lowered because you have used an inflated cost of sales. So when you just subtract 15,000 minus 7,800, what do we get? 15,000 minus 7,800. What are we getting? Yes, so have you seen that profit is lower than your actual profit, which you had to get, which is 8,200. Okay. Yes, and this brings us now to the second adjustment. Okay, the second adjustment is what you're asking here. Okay, where I said that when you've overabsorbed, the other adjustment you can do is you add the overabsorbed overhead to the gross profit. As you can see here, 15,000 minus 7,800, we get a gross profit of 7,200. Okay, which is lower than our actual gross profit. So what we're going to do, we add our over-absorbed overheads. Okay. So 7,200 plus 1,000, and it will give us the true profit of 8,200. Okay. So that's why you're adding the overabsorbed overhead to the gross profit because due to this cost of sales being inflated, so you get a lower profit. So you need to add the overabsorbed overhead so that you get your true profit. Right? So with overabsorbed overheads, okay, the two adjustments in the profit statement, you can either add to gross profit or subtract from cost of sales. Okay. And as we said, we say uh, overheads are overabsorbed. Forgot to illustrate this. Okay, so let's say maybe in this case here, let's say your actual overhead, let's say your actual overhead is 9,000. These are just random numbers. Then you absorbed overhead is 10,000. Here, this is a case where you have overabsorbed. Okay, where your absorbed overhead is greater than your actual overhead. All right. So how you get your absorbed overhead, which I also forgot to mention, it's just your overhead absorption rate, all right, multiplied by, okay. So if you absorbed with number of units produced, okay, your absorbed overhead will be your overhead absorption rate, which is your also called your fixed overhead cost per unit. Okay, when you divide total number of overheads divided by number of units produced, this gives you your overhead absorption rate. Overhead absorption rate, OAR. Yes. So your absorbed overhead will be your overhead absorption rate times the number of units produced. Okay. If you use machine hours, okay, when you do total overheads divided by machine hours, that's your overhead absorption rate, or that's your fixed overhead cost per unit. So how you get your absorbed overhead? Okay, overhead absorption rate times machine hours. Okay. Then if you use labor hours, your overhead absorbed overhead. Okay. It's the overhead absorption rate times labor hours. Okay. So when you absorbed, so here I should have put absorbed, but even budgeted, because when you absorb it, that's what you expect. So that can also be your budgeted. Yeah, but when you absorbed overheads, okay, are greater than your actual overheads, then you have overabsorbed. So here I'll say times absorption base. Are we clear on that, colleagues? When you absorbed overheads, the overheads that you expect to incur, okay, are greater than the actual overheads that you incurred, meaning you've included too much overhead into your units, basically. Then you've overabsorbed. And when you've overabsorbed, you let me just put this one in the charger. So when you've overabsorbed, it's either you're going to add to the cost of subtract from the cost of sales, because your cost of sales is inflated, or you subtract, or you're going to subtract from cost of sales, or you're going to add to the gross profit. Any questions, colleagues, before we now go to under absorption? Okay, so overhead and absorption. Okay, so we have charged less overhead to our products than we spent. Okay, you have charged less overheads to to the units that you're producing. So the two adjustments you can do. Okay, since you've charged less, it means your cost of sales is less. So you need to add your under absorption to the cost of sales. Okay, since you've undercharged, so you need to add the under absorbed overheads to the cost of sales. All right. Then, since you've undercharged, it means your cost of sales is low. So it means that's going to inflate your profits now. Okay, your profit is going to be inflated. So you're going to subtract the underabsorbed overheads from the profit. Okay, because that profit is inflated, so you need to subtract the underabsorbed overheads. Okay, and overheads are underabsorbed when your actual overheads are greater than your absorbed overheads. Okay. When your actual overheads are greater than your absorbed overheads, you've under absorbed. So here's a numerical example. All right. So here, in this case, we've under absorbed by 1,000. Okay. Our actual overheads were greater than our absorbed overheads by 1,000. That's what it's saying. Okay. So this 7,800, we're now taking it as it's since we under absorbed. So this is it's understated basically. The 7,800 now is understated. So since it's understated, we need to add our underabsorbed overheads so that it reflects the true cost of sales. Okay. So you say 7,800 plus 1,000, you get 15,000, and you get 8,800. When you subtract 15,000 minus 8,800, you get 6,200, which is your true profit. Okay. Since our cost of sales is understated, so we need to add the underabsorbed overheads. Okay. Then with gross profit, it's the opposite now. Okay. With gross profit, so we said this cost of sales is understated. Okay. So our gross profit here, as you can see, it's inflated. Okay. Cost of sales understated, gross profit overstated. So since our gross profit is overstated, we need to deduct our underabsorbed overheads. Okay, so that remove that overstatement of the profits. So 7,200 minus 1,000, we get a gross profit of 6,200. So when overheads are underabsorbed, all right, add to your cost of sales since the cost of sales is understated, or subtract from the gross profit because the gross profit is overstated. All right. Yes. And under absorption occurs when your actual overheads, the overheads that you incurred that month. Okay, if you incurred overheads over, let's say 10,000 that month, and then you absorbed overheads after you've multiplied your fixed over a cost per unit or per labor hour or per machine hour. You multiply that, you've got the absorbed overheads of, let's say, maybe 9,000. Okay, so it means here we've under absorbed by 1,000. Any questions?